People say that once children grow up, they must solve their own problems on their own, that parents should step aside and not interfere. But there is a line beyond which a father's heart can no longer stay silent, a line where humiliation of the dearest person becomes unbearable, and when that line is crossed, the reckoning is never gentle. Emily knew this birthday would bring her no joy. 30 years old, a round date people usually celebrate loudly, felt to her like a border behind which stretched something darker, heavier, and hopeless. She woke before the alarm from anxiety clawing under her ribs like a hungry animal, the apartment wrapped in suffocating silence. Yet even in that stillness she felt her mother-in-law's presence, as if Linda radiated disapproval even in her sleep. Emily slipped out of bed quietly while her husband Mark slept sprawled across most of it, his face peaceful and almost innocent. And that contrast always hurt the most because once she had loved that lightness in him, his jokes and charm, never realizing that behind it was immaturity, and behind that emptiness, a void his mother had filled with total control. They lived in Linda's large 3-bedroom apartment in a prestigious neighborhood, the biggest room belonging to the mother-in-law, which she proudly called her office. Though for 20 years her only job had been managing her son's life, while Emily and Mark lived in a former child's bedroom with windows facing a dark inner courtyard, and the third room, labeled for guests, had never once been used. The kitchen was Linda's kingdom, perfect surfaces, alphabetized spices, towels folded with military precision, and any disturbance was punished with icy silence or poison disguised as politeness. Emily made coffee quietly, knowing the real problem was not the house, the socks, or the looks, but her apartment, a small, warm 2-bedroom condo inherited from her mother. Her childhood, the only place she ever felt safe, and from the first days of marriage pressure had begun with sighs and hints about utilities and cars until market became just an asset, deadweight, something to sell, while Emily rented it cheaply to a friend, simply to keep it alive. A decision that drove her mother-in-law into fury, as she accused her of helping strangers while her family was supposedly in need, a need that was nothing but a lie. The night before her birthday, Linda cornered her with a syrupy smile, saying 30 years meant adult decisions, proposing to sell Emily's apartment, buy a big suburban house, and live together, asking whether she wanted her husband to be happy. And when Emily calmly said the apartment was not for sale, the smile vanished, and she was called selfish and ungrateful. The next morning, Emily's phone vibrated with her father's call, his deep, familiar voice, wishing her happy birthday. And though she lied and said she was fine, her father, Robert, a retired military officer, who had raised her alone after her mother's death, knew better, and said he was coming that evening to hug his daughter, a promise that filled Emily with both relief and fear. Unaware that this would be the last day she endured silence. No one congratulated her. Mark drank and argued, demanding she sign documents, and when she refused, his face twisted with rage as he shouted that she lived in their house before the first blow exploded across her face, then another, until Emily collapsed onto the floor while her mother-in-law watched silently, satisfied, and Mark coldly told her to think it over before her father arrived. Then the doorbell rang, long and demanding, and Emily opened the door to see her father standing there with flowers and a gift, his smile disappearing instantly as he saw her face, while behind her Mark laughed and proudly said that was his congratulations. But the father said nothing, handed Emily the flowers, and calmly told her to go outside and close the door. Emily stood on the stairwell, clutching the bouquet, as seconds of silence passed. Then came dull, heavy blows, a scream, crashing furniture, sounds she tried to block by covering her ears. And 2 minutes later, the door opened with her mother-in-law stumbling out, ruined and hysterical, followed by Mark broken, bleeding, and unmoving, while her father adjusted his watch, took Emily's hand, and quietly said, "Let's go home, daughter." 2 months later, Emily stood in her own kitchen as sunlight filled the room and fresh coffee scented the air. The divorce nearly complete, the attempts to take her apartment failed, her former husband and his mother forced to sell everything and scatter, and Emily felt no triumph or hatred, only peace. touching her cheek where the bruise had once been, knowing the memory remained but no longer frightened her, because she was finally home.